Redemption. Redemption. What is this idea of redemption? What does that mean for us right now when the ultimate act of redeeming humanity took place thousands of years ago? Why do we still talk about redemption as if it hasn't already happened? I think we mean redemption and restoration. And I don't think we can fully understand redemption without the proper understanding of sin. And not the concept of sin, but the reality of it. For us to know redemption, we must know what it means to be lost. Just like one has to know chaos to know order. To know cleanliness, one has to know messiness. To know grace, one has to know brokenness. Right? Consider the next few stories you're about to hear. Tonight, the Afterdark staff is going to paint you a picture of redemption in process while they share how their lives have been violently unraveled by sin and brought back together by God's perfect love and his way of delicately stitching things back together. Just for a few moments, we ask that you forget the parts of fine-tuned theology that make you feel like you're not good enough. Drop the initial judgments, the demand for perfection, and just remember the victory Jesus won on the cross over death and sin. Remember God's relentless pursuit of us as we grow to truly know and love him. Through these stories, remember how beautiful it is to know our Creator while living in a broken world, because that's how we understand grace, and that's how we know redemption. Listen well, embrace vulnerability, and bear with us as tonight might seem a little bit choppy. My name is Zoe. Welcome to Story Slam, and please welcome my dear friend Tim Cruz.
You are where you're supposed to be. When I was reminded those words from a dear friend, I felt like a freight train hit me. However, the more I reflected from these words, the more soothing my heart felt from the doubts and pains I've felt thus far. This is not so much a story with a happy ending, rather it is my life story still happening right here and right now. What I will be sharing today is about my upbringing in terms of coming to Biola, how I'm mending my relationship with my parents and my friends back home, how I abandoned my old self and my past life and discovered a new direction towards a new self and a new life. So I'm from Chicago, Illinois, where people there strive for Portillo's Italian beef and deep dish pizza, and where basketball, football, baseball, and hockey rule over the state. Where the weather is pretty much bipolar, meaning it will snow or hail in the early morning, sunny and no clouds in the afternoon, and rain at night, all in one day, during most of April. For those that fall into the category of attending a school like Biola and being far away from home, I get you. I understand. Seeing family and friends is something to look forward only when the holiday seasons or breaks come around. Or maybe you dread the time of the season to go back home, whether you have to fly back or take a long drive to your faraway home. Ultimately, going home is out of the question until school is over for the time being, whether you think that is a positive or negative outlook. So here's another thing that's unique to me. I actually plan to move here to California. Yes, my family and I are planning to officially become California residents, hopefully before I graduate from here. And ultimately, I had to mentally prepare that I would eventually leave my home state and start a new life soon. So when I graduated high school, only California schools were in my plans because my parents installed in my head that we're planning to move soon. And apart from that, going to school far away from home was something I never really experienced. I never imagined not seeing my old friends and relationships and family for long periods of time. So for you, imagine how you grew close with such people in your life and never imagining letting go of them. For me, part of that could have been that I attended a private Christian school my whole life, but I just could not imagine how I could not see my old friends and not just see them for a drive up or walk down the street. I had to mentally prepare that I would not see them for a while, especially because my plans was to move to a new state. How would I function? What would my life be like if I had to let go of my old relationships and bonds that I already made for 10 plus years and start a new life here? So let's just jump to my college decision season. I applied to several UC schools, including one of my prime ones, UC Irvine. While my parents leaned towards the UCI, I felt this tug that Biola would be my school. However, I had to fulfill my parents' wishes. So when I applied at UCI, I received the acceptance email, but something in me did not feel complete. However, it was a time where I finally felt like I fulfilled my parents' wishes and their plans, and I was happy at the same time. I felt approved. I felt proud of myself. But I didn't feel completely happy. So a few days later, I actually received a C in one of my grades in my classes, and that was the turning point. To my prediction, my acceptance was eventually rescinded, meaning that they withdrew my acceptance due to a grade that dropped significantly during my senior year. I felt like I let my parents down. I felt like I let myself down, and honestly, I felt like I let God down. And I vividly remember that night where I did not even sleep until 6:30 until the next morning. For several days, I felt empty. I felt like a part of me was ripped off. I felt like I was not enough. I felt like this was a sign that I was not cut out for college. I carried burdens of doubts and low self-esteem. And being that I was the only child/son of my family, I experienced exuberant amount of pain in my heart because of one mistake that altered my life path at that time. I knew that the devil was out to get me. I allowed my thoughts rule over me and felt like I was not a hard worker. I didn't have the ability to be a college student. All I had left was to make a step in my faith because I had nowhere else to go. But by then, I was already accepted at Biola. But I told Biola that I would come back after my time at UCI when I was already accepted before I was rescinded. But when my plan at UCI was scratched out, I called Biola once again, and they graciously accepted me with open arms. While I was on board with Biola, tension rose with my parents, especially financial reasons. Paying for a public university and a private institution is drastically different. And my mom kept bringing me back of how if I have gotten into UCI, we wouldn't be in so much stress. And I felt the sense of guilt because of one mistake that altered my path, because of that C, because of that class that I just truly messed up. I wish that I told my past self that everything would just be okay. I came from a place with no certainty, and I was in a situation where I truly messed up. But I found hope, and I sought direction. And to say with full confidence and sincerity, I am where I'm supposed to be. The rest is history. I partook in Biola's student orientation program, SOS, spending almost an entire year and a half with a chapel program team. I made lifelong friendships on campus, and I'm learning academically and gaining wisdom from mentors and professors constantly. From a place where an opportunity was taken away to another door opening, I cannot imagine where my life would have been if I went to another school. It felt overwhelmingly real that I really messed up. And I felt flustered, and I didn't know where to go. However, when I realized that all I had to do was surrender my anxiety, my uncertainty, and anything else, God took a different path. And let's just say that my time being at Biola in the past has been one heck of a journey with my friends, my mentors, the people I worked with, and anyone else that I've encountered. And students of Biola, I love you all. And I pray that we continue to walk humbly and love kindness together as one body. I will end with these words for all of us. Remember that God is patient with you and delights in showing you love. So be patient with yourself. He loves the process of making us new. We are where we're supposed to be. So let's take root of these words in our hearts as we finish this semester. And now, moving on, give your undivided attention for our next speaker, Callahan.
Hi, my name is Callahan. I'm a philosophy major and a junior here at Biola. The story of redemption that I'm sharing tonight is my journey as a recovering heroin addict and having only been a Christian for 2 years now. When I was 17 years old, between my junior and senior year of high school, there was a period of my life that my family lost 6 members in a matter of 8 months. 3 died of cancer, and 2 were murdered in their sleep as someone broke into their home. Only my great-grandfather died of natural causes that year from old age. So during that year, I was regularly gone from school to attend a funeral or to drive to Sacramento or Santa Monica to sit with my aunt who was in the hospital dying of cancer. In the midst of this, my parents' divorce had become finalized, and my brother and I often suffered the repercussions of the hostility between their separation. Both my parents were seeing new people. My dad remarried, so I was adjusting to new family dynamics during this chaotic period of grief. And this was all as high school came to a close. And the rest of my family was lost to their own grief and coping mechanisms, so they weren't really around. At this point, with no constants or consistencies in my life, and my own struggle to cope with grief, my mental and emotional state had quickly become unmanageable. When I was 18, I began using any numbing or coping tool that I could get my hands on, but namely drugs. If you can name it, I probably abused it. When I was 20, I tried heroin for the first time at a Halloween party, and its warm, numbing effect gripped me for the first time. At first, it was fun and it felt good, but soon I wasn't able to go a matter of hours without it, or else my body would be thrown into severe and violent withdrawals consisting of incessant vomiting, shakes, hot and cold sweats for periods up to a week long before withdrawals would finally break. At this point in my addiction, getting more heroin was the priority of every minute of every day at all costs. And I truly was a slave to my sin. The lifestyle of my addiction was full of deception. I lied to everyone and I stole from anyone. I stole thousands of dollars between the two of my parents by means of pulling money out of ATMs with their card while they were sleeping. So I would go in the middle of the night. I faked enrollment through 2 years of community college. I told my dad I was going to class when I was actually driving 4 hours to pick up heroin from my dealer who lived in Bakersfield. When it became harder to steal from my parents, I began shoplifting and selling or trading what I stole for drug money in order to maintain my addiction so I wouldn't have to endure the withdrawals. Amazingly enough, I kept this lifestyle up for 2 years without my family or my closest friend finding out. And 2 days after my 22nd birthday, my mom came into my room just to tell me good morning while I was in town visiting her. And she saw my drug paraphernalia laying next to me in bed, seeing as I couldn't go a full sleep cycle without starting to experience withdrawal symptoms. My mom was distraught. 3 days later, I was placed in my first rehab. It was a 30-day program in Ventura, and it wasn't a 12-step program, so I didn't have to give my life up to God or any higher power, which made me happy. Instead, I got acupuncture and massages and sound therapy, where I got to lay on a bunch of pillows for an hour, and some guy got paid to run his fingers around the rim of a bowl that made some sound. And everyone here seemed to be somebody in some way or another. One guy had been at Betty Ford with Lindsay Lohan. Another girl had been on season 4 of Intervention, and she actually tried to hop the wall one night, but security got her, only to kick her out. So I graduated this program, and I went into a sober living in Santa Monica. I relapsed after only 1 month, and I was put into a different rehab in Bakersfield. I snuck out the back during an afternoon session after 3 days of being there. I walked a mile along the highway in Bakersfield summer heat before someone acknowledged the thumb I'd been holding out for a while. And I had this guy drive me to my drug dealer's house, where I slept on his couch for a week, and no one knew where I was. My mom filed a missing persons report, and I ended up going home on my own after a week. And I relapsed one more time at home before my uncle came and picked me up and brought me to the Central Coast to live with him until my family kind of knew what to do with me. And he found a local recovery home for women in the area that I agreed to try. At this point, we all had little hope or confidence in anything working. But this program was 6 months long, and it was self-described as faith-based. It was Christian. Going into it, I didn't really know what that meant, but all it really meant was that we were required to read our Bibles from 6:30 to 7 each morning, and we were encouraged to get to know God in this time. In my first morning of this, I opened the new Bible that I'd been given, and I spoke to God for the first time in a long time. And I just kind of had this attitude of, okay, if you're here, I'm listening, not really knowing what that would look like. And God, being the faithful Redeemer that he is, he took that invitation of a broken and contrite spirit and began his work in me. It was in the many morning hours in my Bible that God poured into me and illuminated his word, and I understood grace. I knew how ugly my sin was in my addiction, and I recognized that I owed God my life as my act of worship for bringing me out of it. I got a sponsor, and I worked the 12 steps, and I gave my life up to Jesus as my higher power. After committing to recovery, I was forced to look at the destruction and wreckage I had caused, both to myself and to the people who loved me. The sin in my life was in my face, and it was ugly. It was shameful to look at. It was humiliating to confess out loud. I began to make amends with the people I hurt, and this process has been so hard, so humbling, so heartbreaking, but also so beautiful in very big ways. God has been faithful to bring reconciliation and bestow forgiveness through many of the relationships I broke in my addiction, though some are still deeply severed, and I must accept that there may never be reconciliation. I applied to Biola while I was in computer lab in rehab, and 2 months later, after I graduated that program, I was accepted to Biola. On August 26th of 2013, I went into my recovery program, and on August 27th, 2014, I began school at Biola. So in 1 year, the things that God can do to redeem such brokenness is crazy. And what a year it has been. So I gave this example last year, but I will use it again. My first month at school, I was asked through a text message by a new friend if I was charismatic, and my answer was, I would not say that I'm charismatic or charming or anything particularly pleasant, but some people like me. I don't know if that counts. I was kindly informed by my friend what she meant by charismatic. So this is a fairly accurate representation of what my learning process has been like at Biola, and I've been loving every minute of it. In his sweetness and grace, God has brought me here. He has brought me beautiful friends. He has given me the opportunity to lead the Afterdark team next year as the undergrad intern. Thank you. I don't deserve any of this, but God is God of grace and redemption, and none of us are worthy. I will always struggle with addiction as a temptation. My addiction is real, but God's perfect healing and redemption are also real and greater than addiction. So next, my good friend Alyssa will be sharing her story of redemption.
Hey guys, just for some context, right before I came up here, my toe was violently stubbed. And I lost my entire toenail, so if I'm a little shaky, that's why. Minor details though. I'm Alyssa, and here's my story of redemption. Anyways, so I work at a camp every summer as a camp counselor in the Santa Cruz Mountains. I know, it's pretty great. This past summer, in 1 week, I had these really mean girls in my cabin. They were there was 5 of them, and they were so mean. And they mobbed around all together all the time, and they were just so mean and so mean. And it's they were never separated. If you ever saw one of them, they were always together, okay? Keep that in mind. It's I was so intimidated by them. I was please. Anyways, every Thursday, we would hike down the mountain that our camp is on, and we would get on buses and we'd go to the beach for the day. And when we would return, we would walk to the trailhead and then hike back up. On this Thursday, when I had the 5 mean little girls who were so mean, I'm just saying, I was walking and talking with another counselor after we had returned when I reached the trailhead, and I saw one of the 5 mean little girls all by herself. I was so surprised. She was flushed and out of breath and obviously super upset. and she was sitting on a bench alone, which was a big deal. I walked over to her and I sat down and I asked her where her friends were. And she told me that her friends wanted to do something at the top of the mountain and she was too tired and out of breath to keep up, so they left her. I sat with her while she caught her breath, and when she was good and ready, we started our way back up the mountain. But I'll never forget that walk, because it came so clear to me right then that that is what sin does to us. It makes us think that we're its best friend, that it would never do us dirty. They would never hurt us. We're in this together, you know? But then the second that we can't keep up with sin anymore, it leaves us at the bottom of the mountain, tired, alone, and out of breath. I found myself at the bottom of my own mountain 5 years ago, around the same time. In high school, I accidentally ended up going on a mission trip. Like, seriously, it was an accident. I'm not even kidding. I had no affiliation with the church, and I had no idea that any God was going to be involved whatsoever. Like, seriously. I was not about that. But from the moment that I got into the minivan at the church in the Bay Area, to the time that we got, yes, I know, to the time that we reached the place in Mexico where we were staying, I had learned 2 things. One, that Jesus Christ was my Savior, and I was in deep need for him. And the second thing, I was in an extremely abusive relationship that I'd been completely blind to for about 2.5 years. This is probably one of the most jarring moments I have ever experienced, because the love that I had known to be normal and reality, the beatings I took and accepted and returned with love on a daily basis, I had just learned were not what love is at all, and I couldn't function, much less accept the fact that there was a God who had perfect love for me, one who knew me intimately from before time, who cared about me and wanted what was good for me, and I couldn't accept that because I didn't know myself. I was just a shell of what I once was. But the good news for me is that God's power is made perfect in my weakness. And that was really convenient because I had nothing left. So after a week of tears and my eyes being pried open to the things that I never wanted to see, we all headed home in the same minivans, but this time I felt like a square peg headed for a round hole. I had no idea how I was going to fit. I wish I could say that when I went home from the trip that ripped me to shreds, that things went great. But when I returned, I froze because the abuse got worse. And I started to hear, "You can't love God more than me." But I did. And he couldn't handle that. You see, my love for God was threatening my allegiance to the one who had ruled my life for so long, and he was not about that. But I loved God more. So the break of our relationship came, and he stalked me and threatened me, and it was awful, and the details are meaningless now and make no difference other than it hurt. But what I realized then, and what I realized as I was walking up the mountain with my camper last summer, is that when we are left at the bottom of the mountain by sin, Jesus doesn't just walk back up with us. He picks us up in his arms. He carries us back up the mountain, speaking truth over us and healing our wounds gently. And that's where I am now, and where I hope to always remain, in the arms of my continual Savior, being carried up the mountain. Please welcome my friend up, Karina.
Hey all, I'm Karina. I love puns, just a heads up. And bacon, yes. And I'm a junior here at Biola. And I want to share this story with you. So this is not a story about a moment of redemption. It's a story about the process of redemption, the theme of the night. And it's about trusting God's timing and seeing that something broken can be and is being redeemed. So I don't know if any of you can relate, but you know how you grow up in your family and you only have one perspective, and so you think that your family is the normal. And then around high school or college, or whenever you start taking psych classes, you realize your family is like just a little messed up. Yeah. Well, that hit me about my second year at Biola. And I thought it was normal that my parents lived in the same house, but lived two completely separate lives without speaking to each other. And I thought it was normal to put on masks and go to church and pretend everything was okay, and then come home and have yelling matches. But after a while, the yelling stopped, and there was no communication. And a little while after that, my father's addictions came to light, and the down spiral of my parents' marriage drove me to a substance abuse of my own. And so I started to go to counseling about a year ago, and there I had a revelation. My parents' marriage was not mine to fix. And thank God, because it seemed unredeemable at that point, but it was still not my job to play savior. And so I ran away from my family's problems last interterm, and I came back down here to Biola, my safe haven, and I left my sister up in Sacramento as the eyes and ears for me in that house, as the reporter. And so last October, she revealed to me that it was the worst it had ever been, and that she couldn't stand to be at home amidst the tension. And she called me one day in tears, and my sister is not one to show emotion at all, crying in anger, in distress, in genuine sorrow. And she asked me these 6 words: what are we going to do? And she said we. So even though it was not my marriage to fix, I was still a part of that family. And as a daughter and a sister, I did have the right to say something so we could move forward with reconciliation. So over Thanksgiving break, this last one, my sister and I decided to have an intervention with my parents. And we didn't call our parents out. We simply told them how being home in such a hostile environment made us feel. And their response was silence. They had nothing to say to me or my sister. And so I left without a word from them and came back to school to finish finals. So then came Christmas, and I dreaded going home to that silence because I had not spoken to my parents for 3 weeks, which was very out of the norm. I would call them at least once a week. But they hadn't reached out to me either. But something already seemed kind of different when I went home. The atmosphere was lighter. And for Christmas, we decided to do no gifts, and we decided to serve together as a family. So we drove to San Francisco, and we spent the whole day serving together. And that night, my father had booked 2 hotel rooms, one for him and my mom, and one for my sister and I. So Christmas Day, we're all gathered in my dad's room, and he said, okay, I want to do a devotional before you girls go to bed. So we sat there, we did the devotion, and my sister and I got up to leave. And he said, wait, before you go, I want to pray. So we're by the door, and we just bow our heads, close our eyes, and he said, no, come here, come to my bed. And so we all sat as a family and held hands. And I thought it was the most ridiculous thing. I was like, I haven't done this for so many years. And so we all sit there, we're holding hands, and my dad said, who's gonna open? And my mind is being blown at this point because I can't remember the last time we've prayed together. And I was like, oh, someone's opening. Oh, that means we're all praying. And I was like, shoot. And you know how you can pray really superficially and just pass it off to the next person in line? That's not how this prayer went at all. I opened it with vulnerability, and I prayed for my family right there. And then we all prayed, and it was raw. And things that we had not brought before each other and before the Lord were brought before each other and before the Lord in that moment. So we prayed. When we opened our eyes, we kind of all just sat there in silence, and my sister and I got up, said goodnight, and went to our room. And when we returned to our room, the hotel room, I pulled out a book I was reading, and I pulled out a journal to take notes, one that I grabbed randomly from home. And when I opened the journal, I saw a letter from my father at the front, and I remembered that this was a journal that he had given me as a Christmas present years ago. And when I flipped through the journal, there was only one entry in it. And it was an entry from Christmas Day, exactly 9 years ago. And the entry was written right after basically the down spiral started with my parents' marriage 9 years before. And so the first line of the entry said, "Dear Diary, it's Christmas Day, and my dad gave me this journal. Mom and Dad have been fighting a lot, but today I feel like they are actually getting along. Today I feel like a family." And so I looked up and I read that line out loud to my sister, and I said, "Steph, if I had to make another entry 9 years later to the day, I think I would say the exact same words." So that's the story of my family and the redemption that is currently happening. And now I would like to welcome up one of the best human beings in the world. Come on up, Angie.
So I'm basically going to be reading a prayer that I wrote out. So it's not really a story, but it kind of is a story. My prayer is kind of like the journey of my life. It starts off with what I was praying for growing up and just evolves to what I am praying for now. It might seem unorganized, but that's just how my life went. So that's how my prayers are. Okay. All right, I'm gonna start. Okay. My grandparents, uncles, aunts, people in church, and even the pastor knew about the violence, yet no one intervened. God, why is it that no one helped my family? How can my church know about the domestic and intimate violence, yet say nothing? Why is the church not concerned enough to actually step in when it comes to domestic and intimate violence? God, I want them to stop fighting. God, I know you hate it, but I just want them to separate. Please. Life will be a lot easier with him gone. God, protect my mom and my brother. It sucks that we have so much fear just hearing his car pull up. No one is helping my mom deal with all of this, and I have no idea how to help her. Honestly, I don't even want to help her. God, I don't even understand why she's in so much pain. Isn't it better now that my dad is gone? I'm so tired of hearing her cry. My dad was not even a good person. She keeps talking about how good of a father my dad is. I have no idea who she is talking about. I just want my mom to see my dad the way I see him. My dad does not deserve her tears. I would never cry for him. Thank you, God. Life is so much better now that my parents are not together. I don't even want to imagine where I would be if they were still together. I am a better person now that my dad lives somewhere else. I don't even mind that he hasn't spoken to my brother and I in a few months. God, it's so weird how much my dad has changed, or at least to see his effort to change. Thank you so much for giving me the love to finally forgive him for all the pain that he caused my family and I. I finally feel free of this hatred. God, I haven't admitted this to anyone, and you already know, so I'm just going to tell you. I tell everyone that I don't want to get married, but the truth is I am afraid of actually being faithful in a marriage. I think marriage is beautiful. I mean, marriage displays the gospel. But I have never seen a healthy and lasting marriage. I feel like people will eventually start to hate each other, and that can only lead to abuse and to pain. I don't want to admit it. I refuse to give my father the power to have influence in my life. God, the truth is, my dad has made me fear marriage. God, I know you already know what happened, but I need to process this with you. I was sitting in the balcony inside the gym during a session for missions conference when they asked everyone to find a partner and pray together. They asked us to pray for someone or a people group that we want to see come to know you. I have a heart for the Middle East, so I was going to default to that. But at the moment, all I could think of was my dad. God, I would go to church 4 times a week with my family growing up, and sometimes my dad would be the one preaching. My dad already knows you. Why was he the one that came to my mind? When I started telling my friend how my dad wasn't really a Christian, I realized that I hadn't really told anyone that before. I never really think about my dad's refusal to talk about God and how damaging that could be for him. I guess I just became okay with my dad not having a relationship with you. When my friends started praying for my dad, it was the first time that I had hope that my father might be a faithful man of God again. I started to picture him serving in a church and telling people about his testimony and sharing about your mercy and goodness. My dad walks around with so much regret and shame. I know I added to that shame, and for many years it felt right for him to carry it. God, it honestly made me feel better knowing that he lived with regret. After praying with my friend, I realized that I'd rather have my dad seeking you than carrying all these burdens. I want him to be free, and only you can free him. God, I don't know if he will ever want to experience you again, but with your help, I am finally in a place where I want to be praying over his life, and I care about his relationship with you. God, I pray over my dad's life. Amen.
Biola University prepares Christians to think biblically about everything, from science to business to education and the arts. Learn more at biola.edu.